Premise number 3. Internal factors versus external factors. There's a lot of research showing how difficult it is to change happiness based on external factors. Research on subjective well-being, the term that psychologists use to capture happiness essentially, has been going on for a very long time. Until recently, most of the research was done using questionnaires. And many people, rightfully so, questioned the veracity, the value of these questionnaires, because it is subjective. I mean, are we measuring something real? Well, over the last few years, what has started to happen is that more and more psychologists have been using brain scans, for example. They've been using fMRIs, EEGs, other physiological measures. And what they have found, interestingly, is that there is a very high correlation between these quote-unquote objective measures, such as brain scans, such as EEGs, fMRI, such as physiological measures, and people's evaluation of their well-being. In other words, their subjective levels of happiness. Very high correlation between the two, which in many ways gives credence to the many years of research that has been conducted before we had the technology to do it in a more sophisticated way. So the research that I'm going to share with you, some of it is taken using the brain scans, other is self-evaluation. But again, both are meaningful as well as valuable, and we'll get more into the way the research is conducted when we talk about phenomena such as meditation, where people like Richie Davidson actually scan the brain and show significant changes as a result of an 8-week meditation program. Or people like our very own Joshua Green, who does research on morality and shows that we have morality centers in our brain. So it's becoming much more sophisticated, much more interesting, and the interesting thing about it is that it verifies a lot of the research that has been done to date with far less sophisticated means, such as self-report. Research done by Daniel Gilbert, teaches Psych 1, on effective forecasting. Here is one of his studies. So what he did was go to professors who were just before either getting the tenure decision. So either they were going to get the tenure or not. And he asked them, so how happy are you going to be if you get the tenure? And they said, well, ecstatic. This is something that I've been working on for many years, and this will be it. This will be a dream come true. And how happy are you going to stay for? And they said, well, for the rest of our lives. Because this is something that we've been working for a very long time. It will make everything so much easier. I can get off this, publish or perish race. I can enjoy my work much more. This is going to transform my life. And then he asked them, and what happens if you don't get tenure, if you're rejected? And they said, well, we're going to be devastated. This is something we've been working on for many, many years. And how long are you going to be devastated for? Well, probably until we get tenure somewhere else. But even then, that may not be enough, because, once you don't get tenure in one place, you don't go up in terms of the ranking of the school. You very often would get tenure, but elsewhere. School that is not considered as good as the one where you were rejected. So it's going to be devastating, and for a very long time. And then Gilbert went to them at the moment when they got the tenure decision. Some of them got them, others did not. How are you feeling? He asked. Well, those who got it, ecstatic. The happiest we've ever been. And how long are you going to stay happy for? Well, for the rest of our lives. We've made it. And then he went to those who didn't get tenure and asked them, how are you feeling? They were devastated, and they were sure that they were going to remain devastated for a very long time. And then he went back to see them 3 months later, 6 months later. And what Gilbert and his colleagues found was that almost to the person, those who got tenured or did not get tenured went back to their previous level of well-being. If they were happy before, they were happy 6 months hence. If they were unhappy before, regardless of whether they got tenure or not, they were not happy. In other words, it looked like this and then back to base level, or it looked like this and then back to base level. They did the same with lottery winners. What if you really win $10 million? Will it actually make you happier? Yes, for a while. It's not for long. Philip Brickman, Northwestern University, did this research. After, within as little as 6 months, people go back to their base level of well-being. People in serious accidents, where they're paralyzed as a result of the accident, very often, usually, again, this is all the average, go back to their base level of happiness. If they were happy before, they will be happy 1 year after. If they were unhappy, they will remain unhappy. Extreme circumstances make very little difference to our well-being. University of Illinois professor Ed Diner does a lot of research on happiness levels, has been doing it since the 1970s. What he shows, he and others, including Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize winner, show is that wealth matters very little to our levels of well-being. Just like the lottery, will make very little difference to our well-being. Now, this does not mean that a person who doesn't have enough food, someone who's homeless on the street here, gets an extra $1,000 and $2,000 a month. That, of course, will make him or her much happier. But beyond the basic needs, once our basic needs are met, and that means food, shelter, basic education, once those needs are met, income makes very little difference. No change across generations. Our generation is much wealthier than our parents and much, much wealthier than our grandparents' generation. We're not happier. And that is global. Whether it's in China, whether it's in the UK or Australia or the United States. Levels of happiness are essentially static, and anxiety levels and depression levels, as we talked about in the first class, have gone up significantly. So income levels make very little difference. In general, external circumstances make very little difference. Think about your own experience. How did you feel? Go back, just transport yourself to the experience of getting into Harvard. Getting this big package in the mail. You said you were accepted on April 1 or end of December when you got this package. How did you feel? Probably ecstatic. Probably one of your highlights. And at that moment, if you were like me, you thought, this is it. Now I'm really going to be happy for a very long time, because I really struggled in high school. A lot of it was difficult, a lot of it was painful, but it was all worth it. I made it. And you went along with that feeling the next day, because in school they started to talk about how you got in. And you felt fantastic about it, right? And you felt great for probably the rest of senior year. Still ups and downs, but overall, high levels of happiness. And it was going to last for the rest of your life. And when you came here freshman week, you knew that it was going to last for the rest of your life. Because you were around wonderful people and it was fun and there were parties. And you said, everything they said about Harvard was not true. It's actually a party school. You were certain of that, right? And not only was that a party school, you were going to have an amazing time for the 4 years and beyond, because your life was transformed by this letter of acceptance, right? Things started to change probably on the first day of class, but not entirely, because there's shopping period, and it's such a wonderful thing. You shop for classes. It's even better than going to the mall. So many, 3,000 classes to choose from. And the second week at Harvard was fantastic, and it was going to continue just that way, a constant high for the rest of your life. And then suddenly things begin to change. Slightly. Ever so slightly. And they completely change once your first paper is due. Or the midterms arrive. and you go back to your base level of well-being. If you experienced a lot of stress in high school and elementary school and were unhappy, generally the best predictor would say that you would feel the same way a month into your Harvard experience. External circumstances matter very little. Very little. In fact, also, place of residence makes very little difference. People think, well, if I move, especially on a day like this, if I move to California, I'll be happier, right? Wrong. Californians are no happier than people in Massachusetts. Initially, when we go to a warm place, we feel the relief, there is the spike in our levels of well-being, but very quickly we go back to our base level, exactly where we were before. I'll take this even a step further. Even though there is no research about this, I bet you this is correct. There is no difference in our levels of well-being if our place of residence is by the river or in the quad. This is really taking the theory far, but it's true. I love this t-shirt. What? If you can't run with the big dogs, stay in the yard? I mean, anyone from Korea here? All right. You made it all the way on such a cold day. Well done. I appreciate it. How spoiled we get here. Makes very little difference. Very little difference. Where we are, where we live, income levels, lottery, tenure, getting into our dream college, getting our dream job. For you seniors, you may have just gotten it. Yeah, you're going to have a spike in your level of well-being. I'm sure you had a spike in your level of well-being when you got this acceptance letter, but very quickly we go back to our base level. One thing that does matter to our base level of well-being, which is an external circumstance, is democracy versus oppression. People living in democracies are generally significantly happier than people living in dictatorships. Women, for example, living in places where they're oppressed are in general less happy than women living in free countries. People living in Darfur are certainly less happy than people living in Denmark or the United States. But again, these are the extreme circumstances that do make a difference. Such as I said, a homeless person. Of course, income will make a difference to that person. Moving to a free country, of course, will make a difference to their well-being. But beyond the extremes, additions or subtractions to our external circumstances make very little difference. Now, this is good news and bad news. The bad news is it seems like whatever we do doesn't matter, so why am I working hard in order to get that BCG job? Why am I working hard why did I work so hard in order to get into this place? If it doesn't matter if I experience these ups and downs. And the answer is that, yes, it will make a difference to our well-being, but it also doesn't mean that we cannot increase our levels of well-being. Now, many people said that the problem with general levels of happiness, or unhappiness rather, the cause is that people have too high expectations. And if we lower our expectations, we will lower our stress levels and we will enjoy life more. Okay, so I don't care if I get a B in a course. I'll be much happier if I don't care, if I lower my levels of expectation. I don't care where I get into, what job I have. I just want to be happy. And you'll probably be happy, slightly happy if you lower your levels of expectations, but not in the long term. And we'll talk about it next week. Not in the long term. The problem is not low versus high expectations. That doesn't matter. The problem is right versus the wrong expectations. Not low versus high expectations. That won't make a difference to our levels of well-being. What will make a difference to our levels of well-being is if we have right versus wrong expectations. It is a wrong expectation to expect that getting into a certain place, getting a raise, finding our dream partner is what's responsible for our happiness. Moving to California or to Fortheimer. That in and of itself will not make us happier. That's wrong expectation. The right expectation is to believe in change from within. So these things will not make us happy. In fact, our readiness and potential to experience happiness is mostly dependent on our state of mind, not on our status or the state of our bank account. It's about changing our perception, state of mind. It's about changing our interpretation of the world, of what's happening to us, of our achievements, of our failures. It's about what we choose to perceive, what we choose to focus on. It's about transformation, as opposed to the external information or the external success. 1504, this whole course is about this transformation, as I mentioned during the first lesson.